I'm JP Lupine. You may know me, you may not. Either way, hi, how you doing? Today, I want to yap about a movie called The Dare. I would have had this video out sooner, but while I was working on it, it ended up veering off in a different direction than what I was wanting. So I wanted to redo some stuff and get it more to my liking. Hope y'all don't mind. Now, The Dare is not at all the type of movie I expected it to be. I went in thinking it would follow the usual slasher formula, only to see it absolutely didn't. There were familiar slasher elements, of course, but the story had twists I don't typically see in other slasher movies, and I loved it, honestly. From the environmental storytelling to the set details and how the main antagonist's story unfolds between present actions and flashbacks intermingled was a delight for me, honestly. I love a good backstory, and The Dare told a wonderfully bitter one. The Dare also did something so many other slasher films just never do. It humanized the antagonist and made him so real instead of hollow, or so othered they're no longer human, so to say. Many other slashers become a supernatural force, either literally like Chucky or Jason Voorhees, or metaphorically like Michael Myers. I haven't seen the new movies. They might have changed that about Michael Myers. Beyond this point won't be spoiler-free, so proceed at your own discretion. To preface, this won't be a movie analysis or like a proper review. I'll just be going through the movie, breaking down parts I want to yap about, give my opinions and all that jazz, you know? The Dare's antagonist, Dominic Craven, played by Robert Masser? Masser. I don't know. I might have butchered that name. I'm so sorry. Is complex in many conflicts and is in various twisted ways merciful, which, you know, that's part of why I enjoyed this movie so much. But let's take a few steps back before I get more into that. Promise I'll get back to that later. Jay Jackson, played by Bart Edwards, is this movie's protagonist and starts off at home with his wife and 2 daughters. He's spending time with his family before he has to go on a work-related trip, all the while someone is walking around outside the house without them knowing. It's a pretty tame beginning to the movie, but it still gets your attention, like, oh, who's out there? You know, that kind of beginning. When it's time for Jay's daughters to go to bed, he talks to his wife Jess, who's played by Devorah Wilde, in private. It's here that it's revealed he's often not home due to these work trips, and she wishes he'd stay home more. So it's kind of given us some background details about this family dynamic. They mildly argue over this, with Jay emphasizing how he goes on these work trips so they can maintain a life that they have. And that kind of lets us know that there's probably some financial troubles, which makes him have to do these long trips away from home. And Jess then goes downstairs to have a glass of wine while the kids get ready for bed, yada yada yada. And Jay tries to find a specific book to read to the girls. As he's looking around the living room, he sees a shadow flash across one of the windows, but since he sees nothing more, he writes it off and continues looking for the book. Since he can't find it, he decides to check the car to see if it was left in there. I don't know why their bedtime book would be in the car. I don't know. Maybe it's just these kids take the book everywhere. Before he goes outside, he realizes he doesn't have his keys on him and has to go find them. And while he's searching, he's calling out to Jess to ask her questions, but she's not responding, like, this whole time. He doesn't seem to realize how she's not answering him. Perhaps he thinks she can't hear him or is still upset about him leaving again and is ignoring him. Either way, this would have raised a red flag for me if I were him. I don't know why it didn't for Jay. Boy should have acknowledged it before he finds himself divorced over poor communication with his wife. Or, you know, would have known a lot sooner that his wife was drugged. Yeah. Before he heard a wine glass shattering from just falling unconscious on the kitchen floor. Jay also noticed the front door was open when he passes by it again, right before he hears that. But because of the glass breaking, he doesn't have much time to think about the door and runs right to the kitchen. And there he finds his wife on the floor and one of his daughters there, because even she got there faster than he did. I mean, come on. And before he can figure out what's going on, he hears his other daughter screaming upstairs. This time he's quicker to think and grabs a knife while telling his daughter to stay with her mom. With his wife unconscious and the front door open, he knows somebody's in the house that ain't supposed to be there. Okay? So that's pretty much all he's got so far. Now, the thing is, we know something Jay doesn't. We know the person in this house isn't some rando that took a chance. We know within the few moments that we've seen, this person came with a plan. We saw him earlier standing outside the kitchen watching Jess drinking her wine. Between the window being open and her wine drugged, he'd already come into the house through that window to spike her drink before going back outside to wait. His plan is in motion, and while Jay is in the kitchen, He goes upstairs, luring Jay up there with his daughter's scream. When Jay finally gets upstairs, one of the doors furthest from the staircase slams shut, and as he goes to cautiously check the room, he only gets a few steps before his daughter calls out to him from the room closest to where he's at. Jay turns, glances back at the door that slammed, and makes the choice to check on his daughter first. He's slow, careful. He doesn't know who or how many people are in his house. Jay finds his daughter hiding under the bed and tries to quietly get her out, but she's terrified and won't move. While he's distracted trying to get his kids, someone walks up behind him and knocks his ass out before he can do anything. Jay then wakes up in a dim room with a bag on his head and a shackle on his wrist connected to the wall a la Saw. This room is a health code violation to the highest degree with stained, beat-up walls and a dirt floor. There's 3 other people in the room with Jay. A guy dressed in a security uniform, a woman, and a guy stripped to his undies, covered in wounds, and his mouth sewn shut. All 3 of them are filthy and injured. And Jay, the genius that he is, tries to run across the room until he falls flat on his ass because he's still got the shackle on his wrist. Then Jay realizes the situation he's in and is terrified of what might have happened to his wife and kids. The woman in the corner tells him the guy that kidnapped them doesn't want the family, just Jay, so his family should be fine. And that is true, which is why Jess got drugged instead of stabbed or tossed out the window. The dirty folk then introduce themselves, because what the fuck else are you supposed to do in this situation, you know? The lady is Kat Gill, played by Alexandra Evans. The security guard is Adam Hines, played by Richard Short. And the dude in his skivvies is Paul Anderson, who is played by Daniel Schutzman? Oh, close enough. This is when we get flashes of a young boy alone in the dark and chained to a wall, struggling to get free while he's wounded. It's heavily implied that it's the same room that these 4 people are in right now. We then see the boy in a bed of straw in what looks to be an attic or a loft. An older guy then walks into the room with a bucket, and the boy is terrified. The man, Credence, played by Richard Brake, warns the boy to behave or he goes back to where he was chained up. Credence gives him raw meat to eat before he leaves the room, saying this is his home now. Credence butchers pigs on his property for meat and has the boy working for him, doing chores and sort. Business hasn't been well, and he ain't got any other workers in sight, so it's not like anyone is going to report the old fart for child labor law violations. And the place is, like, falling apart, so that's also how we know business ain't good. He's a hard ass and rude as hell, even once tossing a bag of raw meat at the boy saying it's for the market, but the kid couldn't catch the bag and it spills on the floor. Credence, with his stellar parenting skills, hoses him down with pig's blood as a punishment. He then tells the kid to remember who saved him when he gets upset, because allegedly his parents had abandoned him. Credence has manipulated this boy into thinking he's his savior, and that his real parents didn't care for him, which is why they never came looking, and he's his father now. After this, we return to Jay and the gang, with Jay asking questions. The others don't know much about what's going on, and Kat makes a crack about how Paul don't say much, you know, because his mouth is sewn shut. Real comedian this one is. Even says she calls the guy Paul because it's her cat's name. Lo and behold, it's his actual name too. Jay has a moment going on about how there must be a mistake and how he shouldn't be there because he's a good person. He tries to justify this by listing some of his good deeds, such as giving to charity, and he struggles with the reality of the situation he's in. Okay, so like the usual, oh, this can't be me, I don't deserve this, ha ha ha, you know, that type of shit. Jay, as brilliant and saintly as he is, attempts to free himself while he and Adam start sassing back and forth. He finds out that it's only one man behind all this, and it's hard for him to believe, but trust me, Jay changes his tune when he finally gets to see who yoinked him. These conversations also help set up the type of people these characters are and how they're coping with what's going on. None of them can figure out why they were taken, why they're all locked up together, or what possible connection they have, if there is one at all. From here, the movie switches back and forth to tell the story of the boy held captive by Credence, who we find out is Dominic, and to the others locked up together. Credence puts Dominic through a series of mental, physical, and emotional abuse. He uses fear and pain to make Dominic obedient, while at times using a warped form of gentleness that could appear to be fatherly care if one didn't know better. Credence has positioned Dominic as his son, but he doesn't truly see him as such when he's made it clear he's willing to kill Dominic. After stabbing the kid in the leg with a frickin' fork at the dinner table, it's not really an empty threat either. He also refers to the harm he causes Dominic as letting the evil out. The pain, the blood, is proof of whatever evil that's inside is coming out. I don't know where Credence got this belief, perhaps from his own folks that are no longer around, but he's now raising Dominic to have a similar mindset. Credence, however he may truly feel, still treats Dominic kind of like his son to a degree, teaching him life skills and how to think about the choices he makes, you know, that type of stuff. These moments, along with Credence's manipulations, are why Dominic stays, even though he at one point managed to escape. Dominic had been made to believe his parents truly didn't care for him in the slightest, which was made easier to believe when his parents were also abusive and had even killed a horse he'd had when he was younger. It's around this time Dominic comes to accept his life as it is now. And when Credence shows Dominic videos of war and mass graves and all other horrifying things from the world, it really solidified in Dominic's mind that Credence truly was his savior. Credence is calculated and wants to make sure Dominic would never try to leave again. He's also adamant that Dominic grow up big and strong, which is foreshadowing for what we later learn about Credence. There are clues scattered about, like him having children's clothes, toys, and Dominic even finding an old drawing from another child that show Credence once had another son, but he's no longer around from what we can see. Credence even brands himself to have a scar that matches Dominic, that's of a horseshoe, something Dominic had done to himself to deal with the grief over his horse. From all of this, Credence and Dominic form a trauma bond that drives Dominic to be a good son to Credence. He's a child, he's ignorant, he just wants to make his parental figure happy. So Dominic does what he can to grow up big and strong, working hard and helping take care of Credence when he's sick and getting older. This is all laying the foundation for the man Dominic becomes, and it's letting us see what twisted a boy into a man willing to kidnap and torture people. And genuinely, I love this aspect of the movie. I love getting to see deeper into characters and understanding how they are the way they are, what swayed them to make the choices they did, what led them down the paths they took. I love that stuff. Later, when Dominic is around his late teens, give or take, he gets into another fight with Credence and strikes back. Once Dominic realizes he actually hurt Credence, he becomes apologetic, but Credence shoves him away and leaves angrily. The anger and resentment building up in Dominic hits a tipping point, and it's set off by something as simple as the broom he was trying to use snapping. It's just the final straw. So Dominic, in retaliation, decides to break into the locked room Credence has warned him to never go in all these years. It's in this room that so many secrets are revealed, including Dominic finally learning about Credence having a son before him. There's photos, mementos, and even records. There are also newspaper clippings about Dominic from the time that he had gone missing among these things. He learns Credence had lied to him all this time. His parents had been looking for him until they were killed in a fire about a year later after he went missing. It's pretty safe to assume Credence had been the one to set the fire so that he'd keep Dominic and hide everything he had done. Credence catches Dominic in this room and lashes out, attacking until Dominic manages to get away and runs. Credence circles around and cuts Dominic off, and Dominic goes into a fawn response, lowering himself to his knees while repeatedly apologizing. He's physically making himself smaller and less of a threat, trying to appease Credence for his own safety. It doesn't work, so Dominic tries to gain some ground by bringing up Credence's son and asks if Credence is going to kill him like he did his son. Credence states that he didn't kill his son. It was in fact an accident with the scalding chamber for the pigs because he wasn't strong enough. Dominic realizes he was a replacement for Credence's lost son. He's gained the ground he wanted now, but when Credence sees Dominic might leave him now that he knows the truth, he tries to manipulate him into staying again. He tells Dominic that there's nothing for him in the outside world and that no one loves him like he does. Dominic, now knowing the truth, isn't swayed and challenges Credence by asking the man how he loves him. Credence notably doesn't answer this question and instead continues with how the people outside had hurt Dominic. He's trying to reestablish himself as the boy's savior, but it's not working. The control he once had over Dominic is shattered. When Dominic turns to leave, Credence knocks him out to make sure that he can't leave. With his power gone and the fantasy broken, Credence drags Dominic to the scalding chamber to kill him. By the time Credence has the scalding chamber heated up and Dominic's foot bound to a chain hook, Dominic has regained consciousness. He tries again to apologize, but it falls on unlistening ears. Credence hauls Dominic up by the chains to get him over the scalding chamber, all the while Dominic is begging and pleading for his life. The old man goes on about how he tried to remove the evil from Dominic, but it doesn't leave everyone. It's a cold line from a man with a shriveled, broken heart to an abused and terrified boy who only wanted to be loved. Before Credence can drop Dominic into the chamber, he goes into a coughing fit, which gives Dominic the chance to swing up and free his foot from the hook. Credence's desire to make Dominic strong had given the boy the ability to save himself, and would be his own undoing when Dominic turns on him. He manages to knock Credence out, and, with all of his built-up pain, grief, and anger, Dominic puts Credence on the hook over the scalding chamber. I also enjoy this whole scene because it's another moment that really shows the difference between these two characters. Credence had been cold with grief for his biological son, Henry, while his attachments to his adopted son, Dominic, were so easy for him to break as he hauled him up over the chamber. Dominic, on the other hand, isn't cold. His attachments to Credence were not easy to cut. They had been shattered, and he's heartbroken. But Credence raises him to be strong. He won't let the pain stop him. He takes this moment to reclaim himself and confront Credence about how his biological parents had tried to find him and how Credence had been the one to kill them. Credence tells Dominic that he loves him, but the words don't sound genuine. They're hollow, and Dominic responds by stating the fact that the man had killed his son. This exchange can be read to have so many deeper meanings. Credence's negligence had led to Henry's death. Credence's abuse and attempted murder of Dominic killed the son that was in him too. Dominic is also shedding the shadow of Henry that Credence had put over him. Dominic drops the old man into the scalding chamber, watching him die as he gets boiled. He later takes some of the skin from Credence's corpse and preserves it, turning it into a mask. I'd like to think him doing this is related to his struggle with his sense of identity. Due to him living as the ghost of Henry and being molded by Credence, he never truly got to find himself. Even his name had been stripped from him when Credence called him Henry, up to the point where he reclaimed his name by telling Credence his name is Dominic, right before killing him. He tried to live in the world outside of the horrible place he grew up, but he couldn't do it. He didn't know how, not after everything that he had gone through and what had been done to him. He'd been isolated and raised with a completely different set of rules than the rest of society had. And thinking about it realistically, he didn't have the technical means to do so either, since he didn't have documents. The identity of Dominic on records had been lost in the fire that took his parents, and he'd been missing since he was 9 to the rest of the world. So he had little choice but to return to the place he tried to leave so far behind. It fed his resentment and anger and the grief over his life he could have had if only he hadn't been taken by Credence. He needed someone to blame for how his life turned out, and he had 4 already lined up: Jay, Kat, Adam, and Paul. He grew up big and strong like Credence had wanted, tracked down those 4, stalked them to learn what he needed to about them, and then kidnapped them. After a life with Credence, he knew how to make people bend to his wishes with fear and pain. With barely any words spoken, he broke Paul, Kat, and Adam down into obedience, having them torture each other instead of doing it with his own hands. These scenes are also where Robert's acting for Dominic really brings out the character. Robert has to rely more on his body language when he has so little dialogue during these moments and his face is hidden behind a mask. The lighting of the set also helps in how it creates a sharper, harsher contrast in how he carries himself. And Robert brings a domineering, powerful presence to Dominic with how he moves, tenses, and times each of his actions. It helps create a believable atmosphere that Dominic is in control, with the others too scared to disobey him. There's even a psychological element that Dominic adds by flipping the lights off and back on to warn the group when he's coming, like Pavlovian conditioning, to make them afraid before he even opens the door. He also feeds them raw meat just like Credence had done to him. Now, how these 4 were connected to each other and to Dominic was that they had all met as children. The group had been hanging out on nearby campgrounds, and Dominic, being the odd one out, wanted to join the other kids. They told Dominic that he'd have to go through several dares before they'd agree to let him join them. Dominic was lonely and wanted their approval, so he went through with it. They had him hold a cockroach in his mouth, and Paul forced his mouth shut, making him swallow it. Kat put a spider in his hair that ended up crawling into his ear. They staked his hands to the ground so Adam could cover his face in worms before they left him there for the night. They were cruel to him, and it didn't end there. There was a campfire story about an old man who lived in the old farmhouse near the grounds, and they dared Dominic to go into the house. Despite everything, he still wanted their approval so much. Kat even promised him a kiss if he went through with it. He had to go in for 20 minutes. Adam made a joke about making it 20 years instead. And Dominic went in for the 20 minutes. Except the group ran away to leave Dominic there, and the farmhouse wasn't unoccupied. As he watched them run away through the dirty window, Credence found him, and he did end up spending the next 20 years stuck in that farmhouse. After the group realized this had been what connected them all and why Dominic was torturing them, because they had seen the horseshoe brand on his hand that he had been covering with a glove the whole time up until it got taken off. Jay tries to speak to Dominic. He lowers himself, trying to be as non-threatening as possible as he attempts to get through to Dominic and apologize for what they had done to him as kids. He mentions wanting to get out of there with Dominic as if to make up for when they left him there, and for a split second it looks like Dominic's guard lowers in the slightest. But his anger and betrayal come back in full swing. He makes Jay inject spider eggs into Kat's ear. It's after this that Dominic learns Paul ended up dying from his injuries, which makes him even more enraged and storm out. Seeing his other attempts failed, Jay comes up with a different plan to try and get the rest of them free. Adam pretended to kill Jay since Dominic could see it all through the camera installed in the room, and Dominic returns to hose Jay down with pig's blood again like Credence had done to him. Jay remains still on the ground, but when Dominic went to pick him up, Jay goes into action. Kat and Adam join in, all three trying to overpower Dominic to get the upper hand. However, Dominic is able to quickly subdue all three of them and regain control and continue the torture. This time, Adam gets a mealworm in his eye. Dominic moves to go for Jay, but Kat shouts at him and Jay uses the distraction to try attacking again. Like before, Jay's attempt is easily thwarted as he's subdued with brute strength. Kat doesn't stop attacking with her words though, telling Dominic that it's not a wonder that they left him to rot in the farmhouse. As he's choking Jay, Kat digs her nails into Dominic's insecurities, going on about how he's a freak, a waste of skin, and unwanted, that no one would ever love him. Kat remembered how insecure Dominic had been as a kid, and she'd actually known all this time how he'd been stuck in the farmhouse. She knew exactly how to hurt Dominic without raising a hand. He starts getting flashbacks of his trauma and the things Credence said to him, already spiraling before he quickly leaves to no longer hear Kat's words. Dominic lashes out at the things around him, destroying anything within reach until he crumbles to the floor. The music during this scene also adds to the mood to get across that this reaction is an emotional storm, that the hurt boy Jay had tried reaching out to inside Dominic was still there. Dominic is still very much human, not cold and emotionless. I enjoy a range of villain types, but the type like Dominic is rare for me to see. You can't help but feel for the boy he had once been. You can understand how he got to where he is, but you're still very aware he's the villain. This movie really delves into how murky things can get, including with how Adam ends up dying next when he's fighting Jay over a knife Dominic had left behind, and Kat hits the back of Adam's head, making him, well, swallow the knife, so to speak. Jay assumes this is an accident and quickly tries to reassure Kat of this, trying to keep her from falling apart since they're the last two alive and need to get the fuck out. However, Kat takes his chance to snatch the knife from Jay and hold it to his throat. She's mostly unfazed by Adam dying, and this is when she confesses how she'd known about Dominic going missing all those years ago and told the police nothing about what happened. She tells Jay he's just as much at fault as she is, that no one knew where Dominic had gone since he also could have told someone anything but hadn't. This reveals how she rationalized the incident all this time and how her character has moved through life, especially given some other things that she had said up to this point. She's learned to manipulate to get what she wants, even if it's at the cost of others. While she's talking, Dominic has entered the room and comes up on her silently, getting her in her headlock while grabbing her hand with a knife as Jay quickly backs away. Not wanting to see someone else die, regardless if Kat's a shitty person, Jay tries to get Dominic to let her go. He makes another attempt to reach the hurt boy inside Dominic. At first, Dominic resists, emphasizing how he struggled, how he was still an orphan without any family, and that Credence had been right in how they were all scum. Jay doesn't give up, though. He speaks gently and calls Dominic his friend, all the while getting closer and keeping Dominic from hurting Kat. He manages to take Dominic's mask off, which can be yet another reference to his struggle with identity and revealing both literally and metaphorically what was beneath the mask. And with the mask gone, we see that Dominic is in tears. Jay swears had he known what happened, he would have returned to help Dominic. He continues to be gentle and slow, eventually getting Dominic to let go of the knife so he can take it. Jay lowers the knife, keeping both of his hands in sight to make Dominic feel safer as his guard lowers further. Jay is yet another person manipulating Dominic's emotions and insecurities, but in this case it's kind of justified given the situation, you know? I'm not shocked he'd want to lure Dominic into a false sense of security for his own survival and Kat's. He also learned the hard way several times. He's not going to be able to overpower Dominic in any other fashion. His only option, really, is to gain control by putting Dominic back into the place of that lonely boy, desperate for connection and approval. But then the spider eggs in Kat's ear hatch, causing a distraction that lets Jay stab Dominic as soon as he turns. When Jay goes to stab again, Dominic turns back around with Kat still in front of him, and Jay isn't fast enough to stop himself. Dominic lays Kat down, and, for a moment, he seems uncertain what to do while she's gasping in pain. Then, what seems to be some fucked up act of mercy, he cuts her open and rips out an organ, killing her faster than letting her die slowly from the stab wound. Dominic turns to Jay, saying how he failed, and the evil never left Jay or the others. He tosses down the knife and raises his hands, putting himself at Jay's mercy. He tells Jay to kill him, but he doesn't. Jay instead picks up the knife and runs. Dominic finds Credence's skull that had been dug up in the room and throws it at the wall, shattering it after hearing the old man's words calling it pathetic. Dominic then goes after Jay with a hatchet, cornering him with no choice but to fight. Of course, Dominic gets the upper hand, and as he's dragging Jay to the scalding chamber, we see him pause. He gets this look on his face, and he changes his mind. I think he still wanted to give Jay a chance. So instead of going to the chamber, he instead picks Jay up to hold his head in the vat of pig's blood. Dominic doesn't hold him down long enough to even drown him, bringing Jay up for air every few seconds. And this is also why I believe Dominic changed his mind about using the scalding chamber to give Jay a better fighting chance. After everything we've seen him capable of doing, if Dominic wanted Jay dead, he'd already be dead. Jay manages to grab the hose right next to him in the vat and swings the heavy nozzle at Dominic to get free. Once he sees Dominic isn't getting back up, he gets the fuck out of there. As he's stumbling around, trying to find his way outside, Dominic gets back on his feet and catches up to him. They're fighting again, Dominic having brute strength and skill on his side, while Jay, making the absolutely correct choice, is grabbing whatever he fucking can and slamming it against Dominic's head. After several items, including a metal pot lid and a metal bucket, get whacked against Dominic's head, he goes down again. Jay whacks him a few more times with the bucket for extra measure. You know, double tap, gotta get that. Then busts through the nearest window to get outside. He finds himself on an old porch surrounded by a snowy forest, and after scrambling off the porch, he finally sees exactly where he and the others have been held captive. The old farmhouse where they all left Dominic. Jay starts dragging himself through the forest to find the nearest road, or people to get help. Dude hasn't eaten right, slept right, or even shit right in who knows how long, but he finally made it outside. He's all busted up, but freedom is so damn close. He keeps pushing himself further. And then the hardy bastard that is Dominic is not far behind him. He calls out to Jay, saying how he could have had a life like his and had a family too. Jay swears that if he could fix things, he would. While the entire situation is fucked up, Jay seems to genuinely feel remorse for how he treated Dominic when they were younger. Dominic tells him to fix it now and gives him the knife again. He holds Jay's hands around the knife and places the tip of the blade against his chest. All Jay's gotta do is push. Dominic can't stand the thought of continuing to live in the personal hell he's already been stuck in for the past 20 years. He wants Jay to end things for good, and to give him the mercy of no longer having to be alone in the farmhouse, full of awful memories. But Jay can't bring himself to do it. Dominic gets Jay on the ground and chokes him while saying he'll take the life Jay has if he doesn't kill him. He's pushing Jay more to end him by telling him he'll take Jay's wife and daughters to make them his own family. Jay finally does what Dominic wants, stabbing the knife deep into his side. He watches him bleed out into the snow for a few seconds before he turns to get out of the forest, thinking it's finally over. Jay even glances back to make sure Dominic doesn't get back up, since that man had every other time. He eventually makes it out of the forest and back home. Years later, another group of teens are there at the campgrounds, having the bright idea to go there on a dare and telling the story of what happened to Jay and the others. It turns out the 2 girls in the group are Jay's daughters, and it's also the 10th anniversary of Jay's escape. One of the boys goes to get his gloves from the car since it's freezing cold, but also probably to get a break from hearing what happened to the girls' father. One of the daughters plans to go find the old farmhouse with her boyfriend, while her sister, rightfully, insists on not going. The boyfriend ends up backing out as soon as he hears noises from the forest around them. He tells the girls he's going to bring the car around so they can leave, something that should have been done a lot sooner. I mean, hello? All the damn snow and y'all want to sit around a little campfire at night freezing your asses off? Nah. Mm-mm. But remember, this is also a slasher movie, so the weather isn't the only danger. The girls are now left alone and start hearing quiet footsteps in the snow. Looking into the dark forest, they see what could be the shadow of a person by one of the trees. As they try to make out whether or not it is, they're too focused on it to realize someone is walking up behind them. It's too late by the time they turn around, and, well, Dominic surprise adopts a couple of daughters. Now, I mentioned before how Dominic seems to have a twisted sense of mercy. I want to add more to that to better explain. Seeing as Dominic was taught that letting the evil out was a good thing, a mercy, something that needed to be done, I believe he continued to carry that belief even after his reality had shattered with Credence. Did he feel good hurting those who hurt him? I wouldn't doubt it. But that wasn't all there was when he seemed so broken by how he failed to let the evil out of Jay and the others. Then how he begged for Jay to kill him. He held all the power in that situation and could so easily kill Jay, but chose not to time and time again. Dominic is well aware his upbringing has made it impossible for him to live a normal life. He laments this at several points, wishing deeply to have it, but knowing his best option, at least to him, is to be killed. Put out of his misery, a mercy. He wants Jay, the one person we see give him any ounce of kindness, to bestow this mercy. But Jay refused to kill him, meaning Dominic would have to continue living in his solitude, surrounded by the memories of the horrors he went through as a child. That right there is also why I assume he attacked Jay and threatens Jay's family in the hopes that would be what gets Jay to kill him. If Jay won't kill him when he begs or demands, maybe he will to save his own family. Dominic is smart and knows how to find what makes people tick. How else could he have such control over several people enough to put weapons in their hands and be so comfortable doing so? Growing up in 2 different abusive homes, Dominic likely had no choice but to learn how to read people, figure out where the line was drawn, and how to choose his words carefully to avoid abuse as much as possible. Begging, pleading, using placating words, even if he didn't mean it. Which means he also knows how it feels to be the smaller, weaker person and what makes them bend. He's also smart and resourceful enough to track down 4 random people he only knew for like 2 days, 20 years later, all without any of them knowing. He got his hands on 20-plus-year-old photographs, their names, their addresses, tailed them long enough to know where they would be and when so that he could snatch them. Again, all without any of them knowing. This makes Dominic even scarier than just, ooh, big bad. And I personally love the unknown and psychological element mixed in here with that. Personally, I would have loved if they showed more of how he went through finding them as well. Dominic is a wonderfully interesting character, and the dare was a delight for me to watch. I know this kind of story might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's certainly mine. With the emotions, the blurred lines, the struggles, and internal conflicts, I'm eating that shit right up. In my opinion, Dominic is the true protagonist of the dare with how fleshed out he is and how the story centers around him. However, while looking further into the dare, they have Jay labeled as the protagonist, so that's why I said he was at the beginning. We can agree to disagree on that one, given that Jay doesn't get nearly the same amount of attention or character development, but, you know. So, yeah, that's the dare. I ended up watching it like 2 times in a row. The first time I watched it, and then the second time I watched it was with somebody else to show them the movie because I liked it so much. And I've also seen it a few more times since then because, yeah, like I said, I'm eating this shit up. It's good. I love it. It's a little cheesy at times, of course, but yeah, as you can see, there's a lot more to it, and I enjoy it so much. And this has been me yapping about the Dare. On another note, my VTuber debut anniversary already passed, and I kind of lost track of time, so I forgot about it. So the celebration for that, I'm postponing to later this month, closer to around my birthday as well, because that's also this month. When I figure out what to do and when, I'll update y'all on that, okay? I promise. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with me during this and listening to me yap about this movie. It's free on Tubi if you're interested. And it's on some other streaming platforms, I think, but I can't remember which ones. Anyways, bye!